You need to be extremely careful if you're planning to rent a place in Atlanta, Georgia. There are scammers everywhere here, and it's extremely common to hear stories of tenants wiring funds to landlords or property managers only to find out that those people had no association with the property. And even if you are talking to the actual representative of a property, because these owners and property managers tend to use their own contracts in the deal, you could be at high risk for signing a contract that is way more beneficial to the property manager or owner than it is to you. Today, we're going to talk about the most common scams we see, the other major risks involved in renting, what resources are available to help you mitigate these risks, and general tips and best practices to help you avoid getting scammed and to sign a lease that works in your favor. My name is Mark Brenner. I'm a realtor here in Atlanta, Georgia, and if you want to work with me, you can book a Zoom call using the link in the description below. First, let's discuss the most common risks associated with renting in Atlanta, Georgia. By far, the most common scam you'll see as a tenant will be people advertising properties for rent that they actually have no association with. Whether it's on Craigslist or Zillow or some other third-party site, these are fake listings for real properties in the city, but the contact information does not go to the owner or property manager, it goes to the scammer. And these scammers will run you around an entire process with the goal of getting you to wire the first month's rent and security deposit. And when it's time to move into the unit, you figure out the key that you were provided does not work to that unit. Or more commonly, you may just never hear from this person again after wiring your funds. Now, these scammers very often like to use active listings for their scams, meaning they look for properties that are on the market for sale, and they duplicate that listing as a rental using the same photos and description, but changing the contact information. Now, while there are occasionally some owners who are open to selling or renting out their property and may advertise both, it's extremely uncommon, so this should be the first indication to you that something could be up. But the biggest red flag in this scenario would be a property manager or owner asking you to wire them the funds via Western Union. So if there's one thing that you walk away from this video with, I need you to make sure that the person that you're speaking with is an actual representative of the property that you're interested in. Now, this is typically very easy to do for large apartment buildings. They have their own website and Google listing, and it should be very obvious that you're speaking with the company that represents the building. However, when you're looking for an apartment to rent that is not part of a large building, or maybe it's a single family detached home or part of a duplex or multifamily property, you need to ask that representative to provide you a copy of the deed showing whose name is on it. And it may not be a person, it may be an LLC, but there should be appropriate documentation linking that person or their business to the deed of the property you're interested in. If for some reason they will not provide you with the deed, that could be a red flag. Another option you have is to simply look up the public records, who is on title. Now, for most counties in Metro Atlanta, you should be able to go on the county website and look up whose name is listed as being on title. Now, sometimes this information can be a little difficult to acquire. There are websites that you can pay to very easy and quickly get that information. If it's not too cost prohibitive, you may want to go that route. Or if you have a friend or know someone who is a realtor, they should be able to look that information up for you very quickly and easy and for free. Matching up the name or company name of the person who is on title for that property with the person that you're speaking to is going to be the #1 way to avoid getting scammed when you're renting in Atlanta. Now, the other items we're going to talk about today aren't necessarily scams, although I suppose you could refer to them as scams, but they are really the biggest risks that are involved when you are going to rent outside of the one that we just talked about. And by far the most common one, even if you are talking to the actual owner or property manager, is going to be signing a leasing contract that does not work in your favor. Now, unlike when you go to purchase a home where 99% of the time you will be writing up an offer on a Georgia Association of Realtors form, which are uniform, and these forms are used by all realtors. They're updated every year and they're designed to be balanced for both parties. When you go to lease something, there's a way greater chance you're going to be using a contract that was created by that property manager or that owner or that company that owns that large apartment building that you're applying to. Now, the contracts for large apartment buildings do tend to be more streamlined, and those property managers do tend to do a better job of outlining the exact details of what you're getting into. But specifically, if you're looking to rent a single family detached home or a unit in a multifamily property, you need to read the contract you're signing. Now that may sound pretty obvious, but you'd be shocked by the amount of people who just trust in the good faith of a landlord or property manager, and they sign something not really understanding what they got themselves into. Now, while these contracts are often not designed to scam you for money, they are designed to create favorable terms for the landlord, oftentimes way beyond the bounds of what you typically see in the Atlanta rental market. Even something as simple as the length of the lease term. Very common is a 1-year term length. Now, all of these terms are completely negotiable. Typically you see a 1-year term, but if you're not careful, they may be signing you up for a 2-year term without even getting confirmation that's what you want. And a very common thing I see in these contracts is automatic increases for the second year that you plan to lease. Now, while it's not uncommon for a landlord to increase the rent year over year, preemptively signing up for a $100, $200, maybe even $300 a month increase is not serving you, and it's really not something that you have to do. So you need to make sure you understand exactly what the planned increase is and if you're comfortable agreeing to that increase. And more importantly, you have to understand at what point your contract is going to re-up for the next year. So how much notice do you have to give that landlord if you don't want to continue without giving up your security deposit? Because if you're not going to agree to that $100 a month increase in your rent, you need to be prepared to give the landlord notice that you are leaving within the proper time frame to get back your security deposit. Another major term that you need to be aware of here is how the landlord can access your unit. Now, the most common term I see here is the landlord giving you at least 24 to 48 hours notice before they're able to enter your unit. However, I have seen contracts written up more than once with no time length given for notice to enter your unit. Very simply, the landlord could knock on your door at any time and demand that they get in, and you've signed a contract saying that you will let them in, that you have to let them in under those terms. Now, would a landlord ever actually do that? Probably not, unless they had a really good reason to. However, you have to be very careful about what you're getting into, and you have to know your rights per the contract as a tenant here. And of course, you're going to want to take meticulous notes and pictures of the entire unit to prove what kind of condition it was in before you moved in, so that upon moving out, if there's any dispute, you have evidence to back up whether or not you're responsible for some damage that occurred, or if it was already there when you moved in. It's also extremely important to know who's going to be responsible for various maintenance items and tasks for your unit, and what the process is for getting any issue addressed, because you are going to have issues that pop up in your unit as a tenant. So, long story short, you need to read the contract that you're signing, and even better, if you request from the property manager or owner to provide you a list of key terms that you are signing, such as all of the ones that we just discussed, and any others that you're unclear of. How long is the lease term? How much is rent going up next year? What is the landlord responsible for? What am I responsible for? What is required for them to access my unit? What is the process for getting my security deposit back when I eventually move out? And anything else you're unclear about. There is nothing wrong with asking a property manager or owner to outline those terms for you. Even though it's not the contract, you have a record of them presenting to you information about leasing that property. Of course, you need to cross-check and verify it with the actual contract, but that's a very good document to have that will simplify things for you. So the biggest risks involved in leasing are going to be speaking to a scammer who does not have any association with the property, and signing a contract that is totally skewed towards the landlord or owner. Now, the other big risks may seem obvious, but we're going to touch on them real quick. They are living in a horrible building and or having a horrible landlord. Let's talk about the landlord one first. If you've done any renting before, you've probably had amazing landlords and you've probably had a nightmare landlord. And wow, landlords can really make your life a living hell if they are unhinged or unfair or just bad people. Now again, your risk here is typically going to be mitigated when we're talking about the big commercial apartment buildings. There's not one particular person in charge who could have a grudge for you. It's a big company that's interested in making money. I'm not saying they're going to be good landlords, but they're probably not going to be insane landlords. They're going to abide by the rules that the company has created. But when you are renting from an individual, whether it's a single family home or a unit in a multifamily property, you need to do your best to have some sort of interaction with that owner. If you're using a realtor to lease their property, you can simply request through the realtor that you have a brief conversation with the owner just to get them to know them a little bit. You can present it as a brief 5 to 10 minute conversation where you can introduce yourself and learn a little about the owner. Now, of course, this is not a surefire way to make sure you don't sign on with a psychopath, but it is one additional filter that could help. But my favorite way to avoid crazy landlords is to simply get a referral from a previous tenant. Now, there is no guarantee that they are going to provide you with a referral from a previous tenant. However, the reality is in Atlanta, rents are softening right now, and a lot of landlords are desperate to fill up vacancies. And if you are a person with a good income and a good credit score, a clean background check, you do have some leverage in this transaction. They want to rent to you because you're likely to pay and stay for a long time. And because of that, it's not ridiculous to ask them simply to provide contact information with a previous tenant. And of course, this is your opportunity to get it straight from the horse's mouth. You can ask any questions of that tenant and really get a feel for what their experience was like with that landlord. You can also just ask the realtor what the owner is like. The realtor is required by law to be honest with you. Now, of course, they are not required to tell you that the owner is an asshole, but it is still worth asking some questions. Hey, what is the owner like? What has your interactions been like them? What have your interactions been with him or her? What am I getting myself into? Now, are you always going to get the inside information about what that person is like? Maybe not, but combining all these little techniques and filters together should really help reduce the chances of signing on with someone who's crazy. If they won't speak to you in person, they won't provide you a reference from a past tenant, and you don't like what the realtor says or doesn't says about them, that should give you serious pause with moving forward on that lease. And lastly, getting into a horrible building, right? The majority of renters in Atlanta are gonna rent in a big commercial apartment building, or maybe it's not even a big building, it could be a large complex, could be a medium-sized complex. But this is one of the more difficult ones to really nail down, partly because if you look at reviews for apartment buildings, they're going to be negative. I don't know if I've ever seen more than a 2 or 3 star review for, a big common apartment building. Tenants are typically really never satisfied with the conditions of an apartment building. And so if you just read those reviews, you may be scared off from that building, which could be a good thing, but I would take those reviews with a grain of salt. Now, again, your best path here is going to be speaking with people who live in that building or complex directly. If you went to go tour the unit, usually there's people milling about. Be proactive, be outgoing, and just strike up a conversation with whomever you see in that area and just say, hey, I'm thinking about renting this place. Anything you can tell me about what it's like to live here. Now, one of the most common complaints you'll see in reviews of apartment buildings is going to be bugs, in particular cockroaches. And I know if you're coming from another part of the country, that's going to really freak you out. Cockroaches are extremely relevant here. It doesn't mean you have a dirty home. It doesn't mean the unit you're looking at is porous and has all these different areas that they can get in. But it does mean that wherever you're living has to be treated for bugs. And so one of the things that you can ask the property manager, whoever's representing the building, what sort of pest control is included in this lease term. Really included in your rent should be the building being treated. That's maybe not necessarily a pest company going into your unit and treating a certain amount of times, but basically they should have a contract with a pest control company to where anyone who's having issues, they will come out and address those issues as many times as they need to. If the property manager has no information about pest control, they have no contract with a pest control company, I'd be extremely wary of signing a lease with that building. All right, so we talked about the major risks of leasing in Atlanta. I want to just provide you with some resources on your journey so that you can be your own advocate and make your own decisions on what is going to be best for you and your family. So one of those we already talked about, which is just going to be the public records, the public tax information for the county that you are renting in. You need to verify that the representative you're speaking with is the official representative of the unit, whether it's the property manager or the owner or the realtor. Do not sign a lease in Atlanta until you've matched the name that's listed as owner of record, whether it's a person or company, with the person that you're talking about. Obviously, if it's a company, the person you're talking to can provide records to show that they are associated with that company. This should be extremely easy to verify once you've confirmed who is on title for the property. So public records are your friend here. You can simply Google property tax information in whichever county that you're looking. It should be very easy to find the government website for you to look up for this information. And if you're having trouble looking up the information, there are a bunch of third-party sites that for a small charge will immediately provide you with who the owner of record is. Now, another great resource for you, if you are unsure of the area that you want to be in, and if you're concerned with crime, is going to be the Atlanta Police Department crime statistics. Now, unfortunately, this is not going to cover the entire perimeter or metro. Obviously, this is only going to cover the actual city of Atlanta. But if you're from another part of the country, you're looking to rent a place in Atlanta, that you really just don't know what you're getting into crime-wise, the Atlanta Police Department does provide in-depth crime statistics for every part of Atlanta. You can look up crime stats by specific neighborhood and for a specific time period, and it will even categorize what type of incident occurred, so you know if you're getting into an area that happens to have a lot of violent crime or petty crime or no crime. Another resource for you would be apartmentratings.com. Now, we talked about how to know if you're getting into a building that just has a terrible reputation. This could be a good resource for you. This is a bit like the reviews that we were talking about. You are going to see a lot of negative stuff, but I have found that the reviews here are a little bit more balanced than what you just see on the Google business pages. And if it's a big building that's been commonly reviewed, you can read through a bunch of reviews and really get a sense for what it's like to live in that building. So it's definitely worth at least checking out to see if there's any more insight you can get about a particular building. And lastly, if you just need help finding an apartment and you're working with a certain budget, you need a certain size, you need to be in a certain area, and you're just overwhelmed, you don't know even where to start, I am a big fan of ProMove. Now, ProMove is simply an apartment locator. They've been in Atlanta for years and years. I've worked with them, I've referred clients to them, and they do a really good job, and it's completely free. Now, of course, ProMove does receive a kickback from these buildings when you eventually sign a lease, but they're gonna help you with a lot of practical stuff that is gonna make your life easier. So even just speaking to one of their representatives and getting set up on a search, you give them all your criteria, what you want, what you don't want in a certain building, and they're gonna be able to create a search that filters out the stuff that won't work for you and feeds you options to look at. They're also going to be really helpful in the application process. You won't need to be worried about getting scammed here. They have relationships with these property managers. You're going to be speaking directly to the appropriate representative. And I've found them pretty much do anything they can to help you get a signed lease. Now, you're going to want to do your own research for which building is going to work for you. But again, this is a free resource that you might as well take advantage of. And I've actually posted a link in the description below for ProMove. You can click that. I will be listed as your referral partner there, which helps me out. And everyone I've referred to ProMove so far has had nothing but good things to say. All right, so we've discussed the biggest risks associated with leasing. I've shared some resources to help you make the best decision possible. Let's end with some general tips when you're going through this process as someone who's been in real estate for quite some time. Number one is that you can negotiate. Now, you shouldn't expect to negotiate anything far outside the bounds of what is typical. For instance, you're not going to get a 4-month lease, right? Unless they plan to really trump up the monthly charge for yourself. However, especially with individual owners or smaller property management companies, you can negotiate $50, $75, $100 off the monthly lease for property, especially if it's been sitting for a long time. Again, rents are softening in Atlanta, and landlords are desperate to fill vacancies. If you're a qualified renter who can back up your qualifications, you shouldn't hesitate to negotiate the best deal possible for yourself. If you'd like to provide them with less notice that you're moving out than what they have in the contract, just ask. If you want to make sure they're giving you 48 hours notice prior to showing up and demanding access to your unit, just tell them that's what you want. Now, you don't want to get crazy here and come across as a difficult tenant, but if there is a reasonable change that you can make to the contract that it would make it much more beneficial for you and attractive to lease a place, then there's no harm in asking. And my second tip that can help you negotiate would be to look at the comparable leasing comps on Zillow. This doesn't really work with the big buildings because their prices are much more uniform. But again, if you're looking at a single family home, for example, take a look at the other active leases in that immediate area and the recently closed lease listings in that area. This should give you a really good sense as to whether or not that price that they're advertising is in line with the comparable leasings closed recently. And if they are just way off, they're way higher than the other recently closed leases, that should tell you you have more leverage to ask for a bigger reduction in the lease price. Number 3, read the contract. We already discussed this, but you need to make sure you're reading the contract, or a realtor you absolutely trust is reading the contract and relaying to you the key terms that you're signing up for. Number 4, make sure you are not giving anyone money up front, okay? And until you confirm you're speaking to the actual representative of a given property, and until you've actually toured this unit in person, you should not be sending out your first month's rent and security deposit. And my 5th and final tip for you here would be act like you have the leverage in the transaction, because the reality is that you do. Now, you need to take this with a grain of salt because everyone's situation is different, and you may actually be in a huge rush, right? Whatever life circumstance is happening, you need to rent something really quickly. You're desperate to get in a place. In that scenario, you probably don't have as much leverage. But for most of us, you know, we're a few months out from getting out of our current lease or whatever our situation is. We have some time to find a place. Again, I want you to understand the current rental environment in Atlanta. Rents are softening. Vacancies are increasing. If you are a qualified renter, you have leverage throughout this process. So you should be prepared and willing to walk away from any transaction that you're interacting about. When you're negotiating key terms of a contract and you're actually willing to walk away from it if they don't make the changes you think they should, this is when I see clients get some of the biggest concessions, not only when they're going to rent, but when they're going to buy. Now, obviously, when you're going to buy, there's a lot more on the line, and people typically really want a certain house. They're a little less likely to just walk away at the drop of a hat. But listen, there are lots of rentals available. Don't have a scarcity mindset. Now, I understand we're all working with different budgets and we all need to be in certain areas. So of course, you may not actually have a bunch of options, but I think on average, people have more options than they realize. There are more rentals available now than at any time in the last 7 years. So if you have a reasonable request that one owner or landlord will not concede to, there's a good chance you'll find another that will. All right, so there you have it. Some information to hopefully make this process easier for you and reduce the risk of getting scammed when renting in Atlanta. Be smart, be your own advocate, use the resources that we discussed, and don't be afraid to walk away. Again, if you are interested in working together, my primary business is to help people relocate here and purchase a home. However, I help people lease as well. So if you'd like to discuss working together for either of the scenarios, simply book a Zoom call using the link in the description below. I love when my viewers become clients. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.